After his decent start with the 50th anniversary special, Mark Waid's next venture into The Flash would be in the 4th annual of the series in 1991. The story would be called Family Business, and accompanying Mark Waid as the writer is Craig Brassfield on art, Andrew Pepoy on inks, Tom McCraw on colours, Tim Harkins on lettering, and Brian Augustin as editor. And I'll be honest, I think they all made one of the strongest Flash stories that I've gone through so far. However, this, much like the last Flash story I talked about, is another tie-in to a big DC crossover event. This time during mid to late 1991, and this one being part of the Armageddon 2001 event. But it involves a man named Matt Ryder who was given the ability to go through the time stream by a tyrant named Monarch in the years 2030. Ryder broke away from Monarch's control and became the hero Wave Rider, who uses his abilities to scour the entire timeline to figure out who Monarch is, by touring each of the possible heroes and figuring out who would become Monarch in the year 2001, with one of his culprits being Wally West. Oh hey, 2001 is the same year I was born. An interesting coincidence there. So, to understand this story in particular, you don't need to read the rest of the event. I imagine the events here are important, but I also haven't read the whole event myself, and I was able to understand this particular story pretty fine. But I thought a lot of that context was necessary, so I may as well get it out of the way. While at a Flash convention, Wally is eating up all the attention his fans are giving him, as Joan Garrick notes to Mason Trollbridge. I'll admit it's weird that she's here but her husband Jay Garrick isn't, especially since he's not only the original Flash, but the event is taking place in Keystone City, where he lives. Maybe he was just feeling under the weather that day. Other notable associates include Chunk, Tina McGee, and her husband Jerry McGee, both of whom have this funny interaction with a fan where Tina sarcastically tells him that she's abracadabra and is making herself disappear, which leaves that same fan disappointed. While continuing to sign autographs, Wally is alerted by a woman named Bonnie Blackman, asking him to see some papers. But while she has his attention, Wave Rider puts his hand on his shoulder, and the story flashes into the next 10 years, where Wally and Bonnie have moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, and have even changed identities to Mike and Diane Edwards. So, how and why did this all happen? Bonnie was a new hire at Dionysus Industries, a supposed commodities industry that she later found out was actually under the control of the king of Keystone's underworld. He, alongside his son Matthew, had the ability to learn everything he could about someone with his touch. I mean, they're both able to hire some of the Flash's most powerful villains. These are not people you want to screw around with. Now, Wally and Bonnie were able to put both of these criminals behind bars. However, they both completely underestimated Dionysus' network, as he knew everything about both their families. He even gets Bonnie's brother beaten up and Wally's mother killed, which motivates them to go into witness protection, explaining why they both changed their names. A lot of this setup is really good, as it details Bonnie's reasoning for meeting the Flash very well. The main villains are shown off as threats that don't challenge the Flash through physical power, but financial power, which is something I like. And it does make a lot of sense for why Wally would retire as the Flash. I mean, his identity hasn't been secret for a while now, so of course he's going to need to change his name. However, I have some issues. One being, can't Wally just try contacting the Justice League or the Teen Titans for help? I know a lot of them have their own things to deal with, but I'm sure if Wally got into contact with someone like Batman for help with taking down Dionysus' empire, things would have turned out differently. Maybe I'm thinking a little too big here, but I'm sure a couple of heroes would have wanted to help out their friend. Another issue I have is with this piece of dialogue here, because Bonnie refers to both herself and Wally as Diane Edwards, and not both of their fake names. I don't know if that was the fault of Mark Waid or the letterer or editor, but it was weird to see. This all brings us back to the present day, where Wally has now retired as the Flash, and while he did struggle leaving his previous life as a superhero, he has a pretty good life with Bonnie and has a kid named David who he gets along with very well. David even inherited Wally's powers, which is pretty cool. This piece, however, gets broken, as David tries to save a girl from getting hit by a truck, and because he doesn't share Wally's protective aura, he is quickly run to the hospital. Okay, I actually like that piece of information here, because I think it adds to the stakes of David's decision to save the girl. He may have Wally's speed, but he is still pretty vulnerable. But it shows that David has also inherited Wally's sense of heroism, which displays some cool foreshadowing. I also like that it adds to the world building of how superheroes having kids can be pretty tricky in the DC universe, as some can turn out okay like Elongated Man's kid, but can go badly like Fire's kid. They don't explain what happened with her, but I can imagine with her powers, the kid got roasted on Twitter.
Now that's edgy as fuck!
Things don't get much better because David gets kidnapped by Dionys, who uses some of the Flash's old villains to each challenge him and give him clues to where he needs to go next. So, after such a long time in retirement, Wally has no other choice but to don the Flash mantle and rushes right into action. What I love here is that throughout this whole manhunt, Wally has zero patience with any of his villains. He demolishes basically every foe he encounters and even yells at them when they don't give him what he wants. That's when you know the Flash really cares for his loved ones, and won't throw around when you get in his way. But Wally has been out of the race for a bit, so he can definitely make some minor screw-ups in fights, like constantly getting shot by each foe carrying a ray gun that slows him down more and more. We also see every kind of Flash villain, from some well-known ones like Weather Wizard and Golden Glider, but also some deeper cuts like Rainbow Raider, Paradox, and Slow, Steady, and Mr. Sprint. Hell, I didn't even know some of these guys existed myself, but it was cool to see nonetheless. Captain Cold also makes a cameo at the beginning, who is spying on Wally, giving information to Dionys, and bringing all the rogues together to fight the Flash. Although, I hope you like seeing him because he never appears in the story ever again. Sucks because I really liked his new look. I also have one thing to comment about with Golden Glider and her new boyfriend Chillblaine. And no, I'm not mad that she likes going out with younger men. I mean, I like older women myself, so that's fine with me depending on the age range. But my problem is that Chillblaine has the same abilities as her brother Captain Cold, and even looks a bit like him. Maybe it's just me, but I find it a bit weird that she would date guys with a cold gun like her brother. Now it's on to the climax, as after each rogue has taken Wally's speed, Dionys uses his new machine to transfer all of that power into his son's body, so that before he passes away, Matthew can rule. Wally bursts into the room trying to get Dionys to stop his plan, but the evil businessman is too power hungry and uses the machine on his son, which actually accelerates his metabolism and kills him. Dionys, now with his son gone, tries to blame the tragedy on everyone else, but realizes that it is him who was at fault for his son's demise, leading to him to die of a broken heart. It's a very haunting scene to see. But now with all of that done, Wally decides there's only one thing left to do, and instead of taking his super speed back, he gives it all to his son. I love this scene where Wally tries to pick up some spilt over plates, only to remember that he can no longer do that. Shows that it worked. But now, the Flash legacy can continue on, as Wally and Bonnie can finally go back to using their old identities, and their son David now has everything from the super speed to the protective aura, and now the ring that contains the famous Flash outfit. Everything now seems to be perfect. Okay, this scene is nice and all, but I think it can be better. Why not have David save that same girl from a different truck like he did at the start, but this time, David is completely fine, showing that he now has Wally's aura, and have Wally give David a big hug or something to show him how proud he is. This would be a perfect way to show that David can carry on the Flash legacy, and would be such a cool full circle moment for him. But we missed out on it. But in the next scene, we remember that this was all a fake sequence, and we're all taken back to Wally meeting Bonnie at the Flash convention, and Wave Rider has already taken his attention. Wally, however, doesn't see anyone, so he turns back to see Bonnie has been taken away by Dionys' son Matthew. So, without the context of why Bonnie was there, Wally just goes on about his day, thinking that she had a quarrel with her partner. But Bonnie looks back at Wally in fear for what might happen to her. That's where the story ends off. Not with any triumphant ending, but a tragic one. Sure, Wave Rider probably got to save the future, but an innocent woman is probably in a bad situation because of it, and we don't even know if she'll survive. What puts the final nail in the coffin for me is that Wally says he'll probably see her again, implying that won't be the case. But I like the vagueness of this question because it leaves it up for the reader to figure out for themselves. I could also say the same for Wave Rider, but this is all part of a whole event that I have not fully read, so don't ask me. Anyway, this is a great Flash story. It has some really good emotional weight, with Wally and Bonnie having to get new lives to keep themselves safe from harm, and then having their child dragged into the mix. I also really liked Wally's arc of wanting to return to his Flash duties, only to then give it up so that his son can carry on the legacy. It goes to show that he's really selfless, which I always like. The villains Dionys and his son Matthew were really threatening throughout the whole story, especially since they had so much power over Wally, even behind bars. The end to their arc feels very poetic as well, since they spent so much time gaining as much power as possible, only for them to get too ahead of themselves once they got an endless amount of real power, that being the Flash's speed. I don't feel bad for those guys at all. So, Family Business is not flawless, but I think it is definitely a must-read for Flash fans. It felt like a huge step up from Wade's first Flash story in all the best ways, and you can definitely feel that Wade is already getting into his groove, even if the whole ordeal wasn't technically canon to the main universe. That's the end of the video, and I really liked making it, so I'm hoping I can keep talking about Flash comics and just other comic books in general. If that interests you, I highly recommend subscribing, hitting the notification button, and sharing this video around. I also have accounts on Instagram, Threads, and Comic Geeks if you ever want to follow me elsewhere. Anyway, I'm Jedi-Liam 64, and I think I've taken up enough of your time. So, I'll see you all later.